Hello, everybody. This is Nanette Kennedy with Humanities Team and the Evolution Revolution. And this is the Conversations with God Book 2 discussion group, the book, of course, written by Neil Donald Walsh. And if everybody hasn't seen the messages, Neil is doing really well from his surgery. So that's a good thing. And
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's a really good thing.
Thank God.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And his son, the last I saw was yesterday, said, or it might have been the day before yesterday, that he wasn't going to be checking in as often, but, you know, the family is very grateful for everybody who's sent prayers and well wishes. Now, I know we finished chapter 11 last week, and there was a lot of conversation, and I didn't know if anybody had anything else they wanted to add to that before we moved on to chapter 12. Or shall we just move on to chapter 12?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right, and if you're not on mute, why don't you put yourselves on mute while Michelle Harvey reads to us.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Chapter 12. That's wonderful. What you said there is just wonderful. I wish the world could get that. I wish the world could understand, could believe. This book will help that. You are helping that. So you are playing a role. You are doing your part in raising the collective consciousness. That is what all must do. Yes. Can we move to a new subject now? I think it is important that we talk about this attitude, this idea of things, which you said a while back that you wanted to fairly present. The attitude to which I am referring is this attitude held by many people that the poor have been given enough, that we must stop taxing the rich, penalizing them in effect for working hard and making it to provide even more for the poor. These people believe that the poor are poor basically because they want to be. Many don't even attempt to pull themselves up. They would rather suckle at the government teat than assume responsibility for themselves. There are many people who believe that redistribution of the wealth, sharing, is a socialistic evil. They cite the Communist Manifesto from each according to his ability to each according to his need, as evidence of the satanic origin of the idea of ensuring the basic human dignity of all through the efforts of everyone. These people believe in every man for himself. If they are told that this concept is cold and heartless, they take refuge in the statement that opportunity knocks at the door of everyone equally. They claim that no man operates under an inherent disadvantage, that if they could make it, everyone can, and if someone doesn't, it's his own damn fault. You feel that it is an arrogant thought rooted in ungratefulness. Yes, but what do you feel? I have no judgment in the matter. It is simply a thought. There is only one question of any relevance regarding this or any other thought. Does it serve you to hold that? In terms of who you are and who you seek to be, does that thought serve you? Looking at the world, that is the question people have to ask. Does it serve us to hold this thought? I observe this. There are people indeed, entire groups of people, who have been born into what you call disadvantage. This is observably true. It is also true that at a very high metaphysical level, no one is disadvantaged, for each soul creates for itself the exact people, events, and circumstances needed to accomplish what it wishes to accomplish. You choose it. You choose everything. Your parents, your country of birth, all the circumstances surrounding your re-entry. Similarly, throughout the days and times of your life, you continue to choose and to create people, events, and circumstances designed to bring you the exact right, and perfect opportunities you now desire in order to know yourself as you truly are. In other words, no one is disadvantaged given what the soul wishes to accomplish. For example, the soul may wish to work with a handicapped body, or in a repressive society, or under enormous political or economic constraints, in order to produce the conditions needed to accomplish what it has set out to do. So we see that people do face disadvantages in the physical sense, but that these are actually the right and perfect conditions metaphysically. As a practical matter, what does that mean to us? Should we offer help to the disadvantaged, or simply see that, in truth, they are just where they want to be and thus allow them to work out their own karma? That's a very good and very important question. Remember first that everything you think, say, and do is a reflection of what you've decided about yourself, a statement of who you are, an act of creation, and you're deciding who you want to be. I keep returning to that because that is the only thing you are doing here. That is what you are up to. There is nothing else going on, no other agenda for the soul. You are seeking to be and to experience who you really are, and to create that. You are creating yourself anew in every moment of now. Now, within that context, when you come across a person who appears in relative terms as observed within your world to be disadvantaged, the first question you have to ask is, who am I and who do I choose to be in relationship to that? In other words, the first question when you encounter another in any relative, in any circumstance, should always be, what do I want here? Did you hear that? Your first question always must be, what do I want here? Not, what does the other person want here? That's the most fascinating insight I have ever received about the way to proceed in human relationships. It also runs against everything I've ever been taught. I know, but the reason your relationships are in such a mess is that you are always trying to figure out what the other person wants and what other people want instead of what you truly want. Then you have to decide whether to give it to them. And here is how you decide. You decide by taking a look at what you may want from them. If there's nothing you think you'll want from them, your first reason for giving them what they want disappears, and so you very seldom do. If, on the other hand, you see that there is something you want or may want from them, then your self-survival mode kicks in and you try to give them what they want. Then you resent it, especially if the other person doesn't eventually give you what you want. In this game of I'll trade you, you set up a very delicate balance. You meet my needs and I'll meet yours. Yet the purpose of all human relationships, relationships between nations as well as relationships between individuals, has nothing to do with any of this. The purpose of your holy relationship with every other person, place, or thing is not to figure out what they want or need, but what you require or desire now in order to grow, in order to be who you want to be. That is why I created relationship to other things. If it weren't for this, you could have continued to live in a vacuum, a void, the eternal allness whence you came. Yet in the allness, you simply are and cannot experience your awareness as anything in particular because in the allness, there is nothing you are not. So I devised a way for you to create anew and know who you are in your experience. I did this by providing you with, number one, relativity. A system wherein you could exist as a thing in relationship to something else. Number two, forgetfulness, a process by which you willingly submit to total amnesia so that you cannot know that relativity is merely a trick and that you are all of it. Number three, consciousness, a state of being in which you grow until you reach full awareness, then becoming a true and living God, creating and experiencing your own reality, expanding and exploring that reality, changing and recreating that reality as you stretch your consciousness to new limits, or shall we say, to no limit. In this paradigm, consciousness is everything. Consciousness, that of which you are truly aware, is the basis of all truth and thus of all spirituality. But what is the point of it all? First, you make us forget who we are so that we can remember who we are? Not quite, so that you can create who you are and who you want to be. This is the act of God being God. This is me being me through you. This is the point of all life. Through you, I experience being who and what I am. Without you, I could know it, but not experience it. Knowing and experiencing are two different things. I'll choose experiencing every time. Indeed, I do, through you. I seem to have lost the original question here. Well, it's hard to keep God on one subject. I'm kind of expansive. Let's see if we can get back. Oh yes, what to do about the less fortunate. First, decide who and what you are in relationship to them. Second, if you decide you wish to experience yourself as being succor, as being help, as being love and compassion and caring, then look to see how you can best be those things. And notice that your ability to be those things has nothing to do with what others are being or doing. Sometimes the best way to love someone and the most help you can give is to leave them alone or empower them to help themselves. It is like a feast. Life is a smorgasbord, and you can give them a big helping of themselves. Remember that the greatest help you can give a person is to wake them up, to remind them of who they really are. There are many ways to do this, sometimes with a little bit of help, a push, a shove, a nudge, and sometimes with the decision to let them run their course, follow their path, walk their walk, without any interference or intervention from you. All parents know about this choice and agonize over it daily. What you have the opportunity to do for the less fortunate is to remind them. That is, cause them to be of a new mind about themselves. And you too have to be of a new mind about them. For if you see them as unfortunate, they will. Jesus' great gift was that he saw everyone as who they truly are. He refused to accept appearances. He refused to believe what others believed of themselves. He always had a higher thought, and he always invited others to it. Yet he also honored where others chose to be. He did not require them to accept his higher idea, merely held it out as an invitation. He dealt too with compassion, and if others chose to see themselves as beings needing assistance, he did not reject them for their faulty assessment, but allowed them to love their reality, and lovingly assisted them in playing out their choice. For Jesus knew that for some, the fastest path to who they are was the path through who they are not. He did not call this an imperfect path and thus condemn it. Rather, he saw this too as perfect, and thus supported everyone in being just who they wanted to be. Anyone, therefore, who asked Jesus for help received it. He denied no one, but was always careful to see that the help he gave supported a person's full and honest desire. If others genuinely sought enlightenment, honestly expressing readiness to move to the next level, Jesus gave them the strength, the courage, the wisdom to do so. He held himself out, and rightly so, as an example and encouraged people, if they could do nothing else, to have faith in him. He would not, he said, lead them astray. Many did put their faith in him, and to this day he helps those who call upon his name. For his soul is committed to waking up those who seek to be fully awake and fully alive in me. Yet Christ had mercy on those who did not. He therefore rejected self-righteousness and, as does his Father in heaven, made no judgments ever. Jesus' idea of perfect love was to grant all persons exactly the help they requested after telling them the kind of help they could get. He never refused to help anyone, and at least of all would he do so out of a thought that you made your bed, now lie in it. Jesus knew that if he gave people the help they asked for, rather than merely the help he wanted to give, that he was empowering them at the level at which they were ready to receive empowerment. This is the way of all great masters, those who have walked your planet in the past and those who are walking it now. Now I'm confused. When is it disempowering to offer help? When does it work against rather than for another's growth? When your help is offered in such a way that it creates continued dependence rather than rapid independence. When you allow another, in the name of compassion, to begin to rely on you rather than on themselves. That is not compassion, that is compulsion. You have a power compulsion because that sort of helping is really power tripping. Now this distinction can be very subtle here, and sometimes you don't even know you are power tripping. You really believe you are simply doing your best to help another, yet be careful that you are not simply seeking to create your own self-worth. For to the extent that you allow other persons to make you responsible for them, to that extent you have allowed them to make you powerful, and that, of course, makes you feel worthy. Yet this kind of help is an aphrodisiac which seduces the weak. The goal is to help the weak grow strong, not to let the weak become weaker. This is the problem which many government assistance programs, for they often do the latter rather than the former. Government programs can be self-perpetuating. Their objective can be every bit as much to justify their existence as to help those they are meant to assist. If there were a limit to all government assistance, people would be helped when they genuinely need help, but could not become addicted to that help, substituting it for their own self-reliance. Governments understand that help is power. That is why governments offer as much help to as many people as they can get away with. For the more people government helps, the more people help the government. Whom the government supports the government. Then, of course, there should be no distribution of wealth. The Communist Manifesto is satanic. Of course, there is no Satan, but I understand your meaning. The idea behind the statement, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, is not evil. It is beautiful. It is simply another way of saying you are your brother's keeper. It is the implementation of this beautiful idea that can become ugly. Sharing must be a way of life, not an edict imposed by government. Sharing should be voluntary, not forced. But here we go again. At its best, government is the people, and its programs are simply mechanisms by which the people share with many others as a way of life. And I would argue that many people, collectively through their political systems, have chosen to do so because people have observed, and history has shown, that the haves do not share with the have-nots. The Russian peasant could have waited until hell froze over for the Russian nobility to share its wealth, which was usually gained and enlarged through the hard work of peasants. The peasants were given just enough to subsist on as the incentive to keep working the land and make the land barons richer. Talk about a dependency relationship. This was an I'll help you only if you help me arrangement, and more exploitive and more obscene than anything ever invented by government. It was this obscenity against which the Russian peasants revolted. A government which ensured that all people were treated equally was born out of the people's frustration that the haves would not give to the have-nots of their own accord. It was, as Marie Antoinette said of the starving masses clamoring beneath her window in rags, while she lounged in a gold-inlaid tub on a bejeweled pedestal munching imported grapes. Let them eat cake. This is the attitude against which the downtrodden have railed. This is the condition causing revolution and creating governments of so-called oppression. Governments which take from the rich and give to the poor are called oppressive, while governments which do nothing while the rich exploit the poor are repressive. Ask the peasants of Mexico even today. It is said that 20 or 30 families, the rich and powerful elite, literally run Mexico, principally because they own it, while 20 or 30 million live in utter deprivation. So the peasants in 1993-94 undertook a revolt seeking to force the elitist government to recognize its duty to help the people provide the means for a life of at least meager dignity. There is the difference between elitist governments and governments of, by, and for the people. Are not people's governments created by angry people frustrated over the basic selfishness of human nature? Are not government programs created as a remedy for man's unwillingness to provide a remedy himself? Is this not the genesis of fair housing laws, child labor statutes, support programs for mothers with dependent children? Wasn't Social Security government's attempt to provide for older people something that their own families would not or could not provide? How do we reconcile our hatred for government control with our lack of willingness to do anything we don't have to do when there are no controls? It is said that some coal miners worked under horrible conditions before governments required that filthy rich mine owners to clean up their filthy mines. Why didn't the governments do so themselves? Because it would have cut into their profits. And the rich didn't care how many of the poor died in unsafe mines to keep the profits flowing and growing. Businesses have slave wages to beginning workers before governments imposed minimum wage requirements. Those who favor going back to the good old days say, so what? They provided jobs, didn't they? And who's taking the risk anyway? The worker? No. No. The investor, the owner, takes all the risks. So to him should go the biggest reward. Anyone who thinks that workers on whose labors the owners depend should be treated with dignity is called a communist. Anyone who thinks that a person should not be denied housing because of skin color is called a socialist. Anyone who thinks that a woman should not be denied employment opportunities or promotion simply because she's the wrong sex is called a radical feminist. And when governments, through their elected representatives, move to solve these problems that people of power in society steadfastly refuse to solve themselves, those governments are called oppressive. Never by the people they help, incidentally, only by people who refuse to provide the help themselves. Nowhere is this more evident than in healthcare. In 1992, an American president and his wife decided it was unfair and inappropriate for millions of Americans to have no access to preventative health care. That notion started a healthcare debate which capitulated even the medical profession and the insurance industry into the fray. The real question is not whose solution was better, the plan proposed by the administration or the plan proposed by private industry. The real question is, why didn't private industry propose its own solution long ago? I'll tell you why, because it didn't have to. No one was complaining, and the industry was driven by profits. Profits, profits, profits. My point, therefore, is this. We can rail and cry and complain all we want. The plain truth is, governments provide solutions when the private sector won't. We can also claim that governments are doing what they are doing against the wishes of the people, but so long as people control the government, as long as they do to a large extent in the United States, the government will continue to produce and require solutions to social ills because the majority of the people are not rich and powerful, and therefore legislate for themselves what society will not give them voluntarily. Only in countries where the majority of the people do not control the government does the government do little or nothing about inequities. So then, the problem: how much government is too much government, and how much is too little, and where and how do we strike the balance? Whew! I've never seen you go on like this. That's as long as you've held the floor in either of our two books. Well, you said this book was going to address some of the larger global problems facing the family of man. I think I've laid out a big one. Eloquently, yes. Everyone from Toynbee to Jefferson to Marx has been trying to solve it for hundreds of years. Okay, what's your solution? We are going to have to go backwards here. We are going to have to go over some old ground. Go ahead. Maybe I need to hear it twice. Then we'll start with the fact that I have no solution, and that is because I see none of this as problematical. It is just what it is, and I have no preferences regarding that. I am merely describing here what is observable, what anyone can plainly see. Okay, you have no solution and you have no preference. Can you offer me an observation? I observe that the world has yet to come up with a system of government which provides a total solution, although the government in the United States has come closest so far. The difficulty is that goodness and fairness are moral issues, not political ones. Government is the human attempt to mandate goodness and ensure fairness. Yet there is only one place where goodness is born, and that is in the human heart. There is only one place where fairness can be conceptualized, and that is in the human mind. There is only one place where love can be experienced truly, and that is in the human soul, because the human soul is love. You cannot legislate morality. You cannot pass a law saying love each other. We are now going around in circles as we have covered all this before. Still, the discussion is good, so keep plugging away at it. Even if we cover the same ground twice or three times, that is okay. The attempt here is to get to the bottom of it. See how you want to create it now. Well then, I'll ask the same question I asked before. Aren't all the laws simply man's attempt to codify moral concepts? Is not legislation simply our combined agreement as to what is right and wrong? Yes, and certain civil laws, rules, and regulations are required in your primitive society. You understand that in non-primitive societies, such laws are unnecessary. All beings regulate themselves. In your society, you are still confronted with some very elementary questions. Shall you stop at the street corner before proceeding? Shall you buy and sell according to certain terms? Will there be any restrictions on how you behave with one another? But truly, even these basic laws, prohibitions against murdering, damaging, cheating, or even running a red light, shouldn't be needed and wouldn't be needed if all people everywhere simply followed the laws of love. That is, God's law. What is needed is a growth in consciousness, not a growth of government. You mean if we just followed the 10 Commandments, we'd be all right? There's no such thing as the 10 Commandments. See Book 1 for a complete discussion of this. God's law is no law. That is something you cannot understand. I require nothing. Many people cannot believe your last statement. Have them read Book 1. It completely explains this. Is that what you are suggesting for this world? Complete anarchy? I am suggesting nothing. I am merely observing what works. I'm telling you what is observably so. And no, I do not observe that anarchy, the absence of governance, rules, regulations, or limitations of any kind would work. Such an arrangement is only practical with advanced beings, which I do not observe human beings to be. So some level of governance is going to be required until your race evolves to the point where you naturally do what is naturally right. You are very wise to govern yourselves in the interim. The points you made a moment ago are salient, unassailable. People often do not do what is right when left to their own devices. The real question is not why do governments impose so many rules and regulations on the people, but why do governments have to? The answer has to do with your separation consciousness, the fact that we see ourselves as separate from each other. Yes, but if we aren't separate, then we are one. And doesn't that mean we are responsible for each other? Yes. But doesn't that disempower us from achieving individual greatness? If I am responsible for all others, then the Communist Manifesto was right. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need. That is, as I have already said, a very noble idea, but it is robbed of its nobility when it is ruthlessly enforced. That was the difficulty with communism, not the concept, but its implementation. There are those who say that the concept had to be forced because the concept violates the basic nature of man. You've hit the nail on the head. What needs to be changed is the basic nature of man. That's where the work must be done, to create the consciousness shift of which you've spoken. Yes. But we're going around in circles again. Would not a group consciousness cause individuals to be disempowered? Let's look at it. If every person on the planet had basic needs met, if the mass of the people could live in dignity and escape the struggle of simple survival, would this not open the way for all of humankind to engage in more noble pursuits? Would individual greatness really be suppressed if individual survival were guaranteed? Must universal dignity be sacrificed to individual glory? What kind of glory is obtained when it is achieved at the expense of another? I have placed more than sufficient resources on your planet to ensure adequate supplies for all. How can it be that thousands starve to death each year, that hundreds go homeless, that millions cry out for simple dignity? The kind of help that would end this is not the kind of help which disempowers. If you're well off, say they do not want help. If you're well off, say they do not want to help the starving and the homeless because they do not want to disempower them, then your well off are hypocrites. For no one is truly well off if they are well off while others are dying. The evolution of a society is measured by how well it treats the least among its members. As I have said, the challenge is to find the balance between helping people and hurting them. Any guidelines you can offer? The overall guideline might be this: when in doubt, always err on the side of compassion. The test of whether you are helping or hurting: are your fellow humans enlarged or reduced as a result of your help? Have you made them bigger or smaller, more able or less able? It has been said that if you give everything to individuals, they will be less willing to work for it themselves. Yet, why should they have to work for for the simplest dignity? Is there not enough for all? Why should working for it have to do with anything? Isn't basic human dignity the birthright of everyone? Oughtn't it be? If one seeks more than minimum levels, more food, bigger shelters, finer coverings for the body, one can seek to achieve those goals. But ought one have to struggle to even survive on a planet where there is more than enough for everyone? That is the central question facing humankind. The challenge is not to make everyone equal, but to give everyone at least the assurance of basic survival with dignity, so that each may then have the chance to choose what more they want from there. There are those who argue that some don't take that chance even when it is given to them, and they observe correctly. This raises yet another question to those who don't take the opportunities presented to them. Do you owe another chance and another? No. If I took that attitude, you would be lost to hell forever. I tell you this: compassion never ends, love never stops, patience never runs out in God's world. Only in the world of man is goodness limited. In my world, goodness is endless. Even if we don't deserve it, you always deserve it. Even if we throw your goodness back in your face, especially if you do. If a man slaps you on the right cheek, turn and offer him your left. And if a man asks you to go 1 mile with him, go with him twain. And when you throw my goodness back in my face, which, by the way, the human race has done to God for millennia, I see that you are merely mistaken. You do not know what is in your best interest. I have compassion because your mistake is based not in evil, but in ignorance. But some people are basically evil. Some people are intrinsically bad. Who told you that? It is my own observation. Then you cannot see straight. I have said it to you before. No one does anything evil given his model of the world. Put another way, all are doing the best they can at any given moment. All actions of everyone depend on the data at hand. I have said before, consciousness is everything. Of what are you aware, and what do you know? But when people attack us, hurt us, damage us, even kill us for their own ends, is that not evil? I have told you before, all attack is a call for help. No one truly desires to hurt another. Those who do it, including your own governments, by the way, do it out of a misplaced idea that this is the only way to get something they want. I've already outlined in this book the higher solution to this problem. Simply want nothing. Have preferences, but no needs. Yet this is a very high state of being. It is the place of masters. In terms of geopolitics, why not work together as a world to meet the most basic needs of everyone? We're doing that, or trying. After all these thousands of years of human history, that's the most you can say? The fact is, you have barely evolved at all. You still operate in a primitive, every man for himself mentality. You plunder the earth, rape her of her resources, exploit her people, and systematically disenfranchise those who disagree with you for doing all of this, calling them the radicals. You do all this for your own selfish purposes because you've developed a lifestyle that you cannot maintain any other way. You must cut down millions of acres of trees each year or you won't be able to have your Sunday paper. You must destroy miles of the protective ozone which covers your planet or you cannot have your hairspray. You must pollute your rivers and streams beyond repair or you cannot have your industries to give you bigger, better, and more. And you must exploit the least among you, the least advantaged, the least educated, the least aware, or you cannot live at the top of the human scale in unheard of and unnecessary luxury. Finally, you must deny that you are doing this, or you cannot live with yourself. You cannot find it in your heart to live simply so that others may simply live. That bumper sticker wisdom is too simple for you. It is too much to ask, too much to give. After all, you've worked so hard for what you've got. You ain't giving up none of it. And if the rest of the human race, to say nothing of your own children's children, have to suffer for it, tough bananas, right? You did what you had to do to survive, to make it. They can do the same. After all, it's every man for himself, is it not? Is there any way out of this mess? Yes, shall I say it again? A shift of consciousness. You cannot solve the problems which plague humankind through governmental action or by political means. You have been trying that for thousands of years. The change that must be made can be made only in the hearts of men. Can you put the change that must be made into one sentence? I already have several times. You must stop seeing God as separate from you and you as separate from each other. The only solution is the ultimate truth. Nothing exists in the universe that is separate from anything else. Everything is intrinsically connected, irrevocably interdependent, interactive, interwoven into the fabric of all of life. All government, all politics must be based on this truth. All laws must be rooted in it. This is the future hope of your race, the only hope for your planet. How does the law of love you spoke of earlier work? Love gives all and requires nothing. How can we require nothing? If everyone in your race gave all, what would you require? The only reason you require anything is because someone else is holding back. Stop holding back. This could not work unless we all did it at once. Indeed, a global consciousness is what is required. Yet how will that come about? Somebody has to start. The opportunity is here for you. You can be the source of this new consciousness. You can be the inspiration. Indeed, you must be. I must? Who else is there? End of chapter 12.
Thank you. Well,
You're welcome.
another major chapter, and I'm not even sure where to start. Does anybody have any preference? Want to start somewhere? Okay. I think, it's where God is saying, you must stop seeing God as separate from you and you as separate from each other. The only solution is the ultimate truth. Nothing exists in the universe that is separate from anything else. Everything is intrinsically connected, irrevocably interdependent, interactive, interwoven into the fabric of all life. All government, all politics must be based on this truth. All laws must be rooted in it. And then if you go back to where God says, I've said it to you before, no one does anything evil given his model of the world. Put another way, all are doing the best they can at any given moment. And I'm not sure, and I'm just throwing this out to the group, from what I just read a minute ago about we're not separate from each other. And then this business about, I've said it to you before, no one does anything evil given his model of the world. I don't know how those two things can be reconciled.
I seem to get more confused the more reading we do.
Same. Yeah, me too.
I figured that was just me.
I think it's because this physical world that we're in, this three-dimensional realm that we're in, is actually an illusion, and so we've got this misperception that these things are actually real, and they're not. It all comes back to that issue of energy, and we're all one. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Sarah books that Gary and Esther Hicks wrote, but in there, there's a quote: "It's as easy to create a castle as it is to create a button." And I think that talks to the difficulty of wrapping our head around these issues, because it is. Once you can see the energetic creativity that we have, we can fix all of what we see in this three-dimensional realm. But we're disconnected from that power. We're disconnected from our souls, basically. I don't know if that helps. But.
That does.
But when you go to one of these countries with all these children starving to death and tell them that what they're seeing is not real, you're probably going to make them mad. I mean, really. It would make me.
I don't
Yeah.
think that you start out by telling them what they're seeing isn't real. And God said it in this chapter earlier. It's we have to wake them up. That's what was said. The thing that we do to help them is to wake them up. And so, I mean, telling them that this isn't real, it wouldn't be where you'd start. You'd awaken them to their power. Wallace D. Wattles talks about this a lot in his book, The Science of Getting Rich. He talks about the worst thing that you can do is be charitable, because all you're doing is perpetuating the energy of you're in lack, I have something, I'll give it to you, that solves your problem. And that, as we know, that doesn't solve poor people's problems.
Well, then maybe that's where we should have started with me, because like I keep trying to tell y'all, I'm not nearly as far along as y'all are. I still see starving babies.
Right.
And you have a very compassionate heart, Angela, so don't say, please, don't diminish yourself that way. You have an extremely compassionate heart, and I'm very grateful for your presence in this group. And, you know, to me, that chapter speaks very clearly of the innocence being programmed incorrectly, and that's what God is saying over and over and over again. All of life is innocent, and, you know, it was coming into Willy Wonka land in the third dimension that created the innocence to shut down its heart, right? And now the mind has been in charge for who knows how long, and it's time for the holy mind to move into the sweet, innocent heart, and then it's like things will be solved just like that, right? It's like the button and the castle, right?
Yep. And Diane, did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to say something. It is a difficult chapter, it's a difficult discussion, but God, more than saying here, well, the only thing you have is to wake them up and it is all an illusion. He talks about sharing all the chapter. And he's saying that is enough on the hurt for everyone. He's not saying that is an illusion, that there's no problem. He's saying that we have to share. And at the end, when God says, this raises yet another question to those who don't take the opportunities presented to them. Do you have another chance and another? And Neil says, no. And then God says, if I took that attitude, you would be lost to hell forever. I'll tell you this, compassion never ends, love never stops, patience never runs out of God's world. So we cannot avoid the issue of sharing, just saying we live in an illusion. And we just have to wake up everyone. The most important about what I understand that God says is, why are you giving? Why do you want help the helps not? And if it is a power trip, then it won't work. So it is also not only about waking up the other, it's about waking up our own heart and knowing what is real goodness, and to clean our power trip, to clean our need to feel good, to get us to be good, and then we will know what to do. And complete.
I really like that part that you just reread about compassion never ends, and I underscored this. Love never stops, patience never runs out in God's world. Only in the world of man is goodness limited. Oh, made up a new word. And I think that's a really important. That would be an important thing, I think, like for my bathroom mirror, or in my car, even possibly to pass out on Awakening Day. Because I keep jumping back to, and I know we've got our own poverty issues in this country, But I've also traveled to countries such as South Africa, where the what we call poverty is nothing compared to what the poverty that goes on there. And I'm sure this is the same for different places around the world. And there's a very high crime rate in South Africa. And it is because of the have-nots, because the have-nots live in these tin shacks with no plumbing, no electricity, and they are between very affluent areas. And the crime happens in the affluent areas because the have-nots are desperate and trying to get what it is that they need to survive with some form of dignity. Let's see who's... Oh, Anne is saying, what I hear is we are being asked, what are your motives? And, I could say, I'm going to say one thing and I'll open up the floor. But if my motive is to help, and in so doing, it makes me feel good, makes me feel like a better person, I think that's okay. I think that's an okay motive. Anybody else?
I think that if your quality of your intention of before you create an act is everything, and I think that's what Neil's talking about in this book.
Yeah.
The quality of your intention. If your intention is to be loving and compassion, and that's what you choose to express in every now moment, then the love and the compassion and the endless patience get to flow freely. They're not bumping up against walls. And so, we have to, I think, get better at asking ourselves, what is the quality of my intention before I act? I'm complete.
Now, if you're listening on the phone, there was a lot of background noise earlier, so I had to put everybody on mute. I hope I'm not muting anybody out that wants to say something. Linda, would you like to say something? Wait, what just happened to Linda?
She said she has to go.
Oh, bye. Didn't catch that. All right. And all my pictures on my screen bounced around. I was like, where'd she go? Well, I think that one of the things that's, and actually Linda brought this up a little bit, about the Abraham Hicks. I haven't read the Sarah collection that she was talking about, but I did do A Course in Miracles 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember, and I'm sure some people in this group remember me saying this before, but there's a big discussion on how everything was an illusion. And it really got me to thinking. I thought, well, I was sexually assaulted, and that certainly was no illusion. And it really upset me. And so it's sort of like when Angela was saying, you can't go tell kids, they're just having the illusion of starvation. And to those points, I think Neil would say, for those of you who've heard him speak about this, is that there's this thing called the spiritual bypass. And it means when you don't take the time to be compassionate and hear somebody out, and you say something thoughtless like, well, I wonder what you did to deserve that. Because that's not what compassion is. That's being judgmental and really getting in the way of our own selves doing what we're trying to do, which is to make a better place. And I know all of you who are not in the U.S. are going to be really glad when the election's over, because you're going to be sick of us talking about it. But, tomorrow or Tuesday, uh, there's a lot of emotions running wild in this country. And I know from around the world because what happens here affects people all over the world. And I think one of the things that there are several meditations tomorrow night to try the energy that Linda was talking about. That is trying to get the energy together just so that we can all hold on to each other regardless of the turnout. And I'm just hoping that all this in this chapter that kind of seems like, oh my God, there's so much information here. And where Neil did that huge spiel where God said, whoa, I've never heard you go on like that before. I think that's going on in all of our heads, even though this book was written 20 years ago. You know, and I think it was Angela last week said, here we are 20 years later.
Yep. To me, that's kind of discouraging. I'm not a patient person, I don't think.
Well, there are a lot of meditations going on. There's one at 4 o'clock today. There's one at 6 o'clock, the Liberty Bell. It only takes 1 minute, and that's going on. I think that what's happening in our world right now is his story has a way of repeating itself without an act of consciousness. And we are gathering the momentum to know of our unity and that, and that we are changing the world. And I personally never give up. And I believe that that even coming together in this group and all the ways that we come together, that we are creating the unity that is going to bring peace. And everyone deserves peace and compassion and patience. Everyone, no matter what.
I agree with that. And it's interesting. Today we had, at one point there were 18 people on the call, which is one of our largest calls. So that's really good. And that's an example of, even if we're a small group, relatively small, we are trying to discuss these things with each other so that we can go on throughout the rest of the week. And there was one line that I thought was particularly a good takeaway for the week. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Probably not, but I'm probably never going to find it. That's the problem too. There's a lot of good lines in this.
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear that? Your first question always must be, what do I want here? Not what does the other person want here? And I think if we stop and ask ourselves, it's sort of like when a couple people are having a conversation and instead of listening to what the other person's saying, you're thinking about what you're going to say back to them. And I think our first question always must be, what do I want here? Not what does the other person want here? It's kind of a twist on, I think Neil even says, well, that goes against how I was raised.
Well, exactly. But the innocence was programmed incorrectly. So let's remember that. And, that's the same thing as saying quality of intention. What do I want? Well, what is the quality of my intention before I act? And I have faith that humanity is being reprogrammed to be more open-hearted. I have faith. Like, we've come so far. And, this election is just a reflection of what isn't working and what needs to be looked at again. Like, we had a similar situation in Canada 30 years ago. And, Shabana knows that. I have faith. I have faith.
Well, I think we all do, and I will just be glad after Tuesday. And one of the things I want to mention is that Awakening Day is Friday, not obviously upcoming Friday. And
Is it Saturday, Nanette? I think it's Saturday, November 12th.
Saturday.
You're right.
Saturday.
Saturday. I don't know why I was thinking the 11th. Anyway, I will be putting up some posts and suggestions, and I'm sure Michelle can too, of different things we can all be doing on Awakening Day. One of which is continue to be grateful that Neil is recovering, and also go out and I'm going to type up chapter 11 in this book, or chapter 11 we just read. No, chapter 12.
So we're still on
12.
Okay, so we're on book 2?
Book 2, chapter 12.
Okay.
Which is
what we read today.
12.
Okay, thank you, because I couldn't find it because I was not in the group last week, so I was scrambling around, and I've got the book that's combined all 3 together. So anyway, thank you for that.
Yeah, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type up chapter 11 because we thought it was very powerful, and some have asked if that's okay if they distribute that on Awakening Day. We've gone a couple minutes over. I love you all, and I will be keeping everybody around the globe in my thoughts and prayers, and that I'm sure the earth will continue to go on its axis come whatever comes Tuesday.
Well, and you know what? At some point in the not too distant future, this is going to be made into a blockbuster comedy.
Oh, yeah, there is the upside.
It already is.
But they could actually start back with the Sarah Palin one.
Yeah, exactly.
But and at least we can laugh. So
yeah, laugh.
Yep.
It's good. It's a healthy contagion for our planet.
Yep. And I really appreciate everybody.
Yeah.
Angela, Michelle, Harvey, Andy, Savannah, Tammy,
Everybody.
Angela, Christine, Diane, Sarah, Renee, and Brenna, who's on the phone, and a couple other people that are on the phone, Carolyn. And anyway, I just want you to all know that you are appreciated.
We love each other.
We do. Love
We
you
love
guys.
each other like little children.
That's right. All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.